Membership of the European Union transformed Ireland forever for the better. It's made profound and positive impacts on our economy, our society and our political outlook. But before looking at the impact of those changes, let me take you back in time to what Ireland looked like back in 1973. So Ireland in 1973 is not an especially happy place. It's one of the poorest countries in Europe, with incomes just 61% of the rest of Europe. It's also a really unequal society. Women working in manufacturing, for example, earn only 43% of what their male counterparts earn. In Northern Ireland, serious violence has broken out between the Catholic and Protestant communities. 1972 saw the worst ever year of violence in Northern Ireland, where more than 500 people lost their lives. So at this point, what was then the European Economic Community, it was only 15 years old, with its 6 founder members of France, West Germany, Luxembourg, Belgium and the Netherlands. And this was going to be the first ever enlargement of the bloc, though far from the last, and it wasn't without controversy. Twice Ireland's application to join had got caught up with the politics around Britain's accession, which was vetoed twice by President de Gaulle in 1963 and 1967. But by 1969, de Gaulle's successor, President Pompidou, said that he was open to British accession, and that opened a path for Ireland to also join. And this was an opportunity that the people of Ireland seized gladly. In 1972, 83% of the electorate voted in a referendum to join the European Economic Community. And along with Denmark and the UK, on the 1st of January 1973, we joined. Membership of the EU has profoundly changed the country, and I want to highlight 3 areas in particular where Ireland has benefited these past 50 years: prosperity, peace, and possibility. On prosperity, membership of the EU helped transform Ireland from a poor country blighted by emigration and mass unemployment to an outward-looking, highly diversified and international economy. In 1973, Ireland was a small, isolated, largely closed economy on the fringes of Europe. Many people, especially young people from rural areas, often viewed emigration as the only option. A bit like Poland, Ireland has long had a history of emigration. On the island of Ireland today, there are around 7 million people, but around the world we estimate the diaspora at around 70 million, including one Joe Biden. And we estimate that of the roughly 52 presidents of America, about half of them have been Irish. So you can say America has made the most successful Irish startup. The Irish economy in 1973, as it had been for many centuries, was heavily based on agriculture. International trade was limited and heavily concentrated on the UK, which had about 55% of our exports. EU membership helped Ireland in a number of ways. First, it gave us access to the world's largest trading bloc. Rather than a small domestic market of 5 million people, Irish companies and consumers now have access to a market of more than 450 million people. This has been particularly important since the introduction of the single market in 1993, which massively reduced bureaucracy and the cost of business across Europe. Irish companies have been able to expand across the continent. Enterprise Ireland estimates that Irish companies employ over 230,000 people across Europe, including around 25,000 people here in Poland. And today it was a pleasure visiting one of those companies, PM Group, here in Wrocławiu, that employ about 230 people here in the city. Secondly, the EU provided Ireland with structural funds which were used across the economy, including investment in infrastructure, modernising agriculture and investment in education. As one of the poorest member states, Ireland benefited enormously from these funds, and we have now transitioned to the status of a net contributor to the European budget, helping other economies in Europe along the same path. Thirdly, membership of the EU and access to such a large market is a critical aspect in making Ireland an attractive destination for inward investment. International investors are attracted by a highly educated workforce and access to the single market, and now play a crucial role in our economy. This has allowed the economy to diversify and also to develop more high-tech and service-based industries. When we joined the EU, agriculture made up about 25% of the economy. Now it accounts for less than 1%. It's hard to overstate the impact of these changes on Ireland's economy and society. We now have a trading surplus of over 60 billion euros, and rather than a country of constant emigration, we now start to welcome people from around the world, including around 100,000 from here in Poland. The second major way in which the EU has benefited Ireland is the contribution to peace. The European coal and steel community, as originally conceived, was an answer to centuries of conflict and misery in Europe, which culminated in the disaster of World War II. The architects of the European Union had a simple but brilliant idea that by collectivising resources and encouraging trade, they could break the cycle of endless violence and on the European continent. This has proved a staggeringly successful model. As John Hume, the Irish politician who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1998, put it, the European Union is the best example in the history of the world of conflict resolution. Many of you won't be familiar with this background to the situation in Northern Ireland, so let me briefly set it out. For over 700 years, Ireland was under British rule with a series of failed rebellions and uprisings. But from 1919 to 1921, Ireland fought the War of Independence, and like Poland, we regained our status as an independent state. One of the conditions of the treaty agreed with Britain, however, was that the north part of Ireland, where a majority of the population were British, would remain part of the United Kingdom. As a result, Northern Ireland was created in 1922. The region had a population of about 1.5 million people. About 1 million were Protestants who wanted to remain part of the United Kingdom. About 500,000 were Catholics who would have prepared to join the newly independent Ireland. For the next 40 years, Northern Ireland was largely peaceful, but at the end of the 1960s, a terrible conflict broke out between the Unionist and Nationalist communities. There were two main reasons for the conflict. The first was the underlying historical tension between those who viewed themselves as British and want to be part of Britain, and those who viewed themselves as Irish and want to be part of Ireland. The second was civil rights. The Protestant and Unionist majority in Northern Ireland had total control of the Northern Ireland government and didn't give full rights to the Catholic minority, including the right to vote, to own housing, or to get certain jobs. As they had a permanent majority in government, they controlled all the laws and allocation of resources. The 1960s was a time of civil rights movements around the world, notably in the United States, and the Catholic population in Northern Ireland also began to march to defend their rights. These marches were often met by violence, though, and what began as a civil rights struggle quickly turned into an armed struggle. A particularly dark day was Bloody Sunday in 1972, when the British Army shot and killed 26 unarmed civilians at a civil rights march in Derry. Violence led to violence, and soon increasingly well-equipped paramilitary organisations like the IRA and UDA emerged. These groups began systematic campaigns of terrorist violence. Over the next 30 years, over 3,500 people died. Many more were injured. I grew up in Northern Ireland, in a country where almost every night on the news there was a report of a shooting or a bombing. It was also a very divided country. Catholics and Protestants went to separate schools, separate churches, even different shops. While some were working towards violence, some brave leaders, activists and community leaders were working towards peace. Peace in Northern Ireland was only possible thanks to EU accession. 50 years before accession, Ireland had fought a bloody war of independence against British occupation, and relations between the countries remained hostile. EU membership changed the dynamics by forging new links. As countries who joined the EU on the same day, Irish and British officials were now meeting every day in Brussels. Perhaps to their surprise, they often found that they agreed on matters of policy. Relations were established over long nights around negotiating tables and cups of coffee in Brussels bistros, which grew into respect and even friendships. From a hostile silence which preceded it, crucial channels of dialogue were forged. EU membership also created a common legal footing and a shared set of legislation, particularly after the establishment of the single market. Much of the source of friction in Northern Ireland comes down to a simple, fundamental issue: who makes our laws, London or Dublin? But when common laws are forged in Brussels, much of that problem dissolves away. Whenever he was asked if he was British or Irish, John Hume simply replied, "I am a European." The EU also helped the peace process in very practical ways, providing significant financial support for peace-building projects, investment in education, and political support and mediation. Put simply, the Good Friday Agreement in 1998, which ended 30 years of conflict, could not have been achieved without EU membership. We all know that the United Kingdom has chosen to leave the European Union. We regret but respect that decision. This does, of course, present a new set of challenges for Northern Ireland, particularly as UK laws begin to diverge from those crafted in Brussels. It's also damaged that common bedrock of a single European identity, reopening sharper divisions again between being British or being Irish. In the years following Brexit, we in Ireland are very grateful for the solidarity of all our European partners when it comes to preserving the hard-won peace on the island of Ireland. This remains a key priority for the Irish Government, and we will continue to support peace. Sadly, we're not at peace in Europe today, and I want to take a moment to recognise the resilience and heroism of the Ukrainian people who have fought with such bravery and determination against Russian aggression. Ireland stands in full solidarity with Ukraine. We've welcomed almost 100,000 Ukrainian refugees, provided more than 80 million in humanitarian funding, and over 125 million in non-lethal military support through the European Peace Facility. We support the toughest possible sanctions against Russia and demand accountability for Russia's crimes. We believe that Ukraine's future lies in the European Union, and we support a rapid accession process.